My other question regards the use of media in general. I wonder if one can be mindful while at the same time one is being connected, as most of us are today, nowadays, to the social media, smartphone applications, etc. And I also wonder how is this affecting our deep listening skills?
We believe that the smartphones and the internet, the emails can help us connect with each other, but communication has become more difficult even with these devices, electronic devices. Even if we hear the news several times a day, even if we communicate with each other several times a day, that does not mean that real communication is possible. We still do not understand each other. We still do not understand the suffering and difficulties of others. We still continue to blame on each other. So many electronic devices are helping us to get away from ourselves. And do not give us a chance to be with ourselves. There is suffering, there is fear, anger in ourselves, and we do not have the time and the way to handle the suffering inside of us. We cannot communicate with ourselves. In fact, we are trying to run away from ourselves. We cannot listen to ourselves. We cannot help ourselves to suffer less. So how can we understand another person and help him or her suffer less? Even if we have a lot of electronic devices. So that is why mindfulness is very important. It helps us to release the tension in our body. It helps us to go home to ourselves without fear in order to recognize the suffering inside, embrace it, and begin to understand it. Understanding our suffering, we understand the suffering of our father, our mother, our ancestors, our people. And that understanding brings about compassion that has the power to heal, to transform. And when we get lighter, when we get healed, we can help other people around us to do the same, to get the healing and transformation. And we can do that without any electronic devices. And the power to listen, to understand, and to restore communication and reconcile is possible. When you understand your own suffering, you reconcile with yourself easily. You reconcile with your father, your mother, and your ancestors easily, because your suffering carries within itself the suffering of your father, mother, and ancestors. And when you understand your suffering, when you have reconciled with yourself, and then it's much easier to understand the suffering of the other person, of the world, and reconcile with them. When you look at them, you are capable of seeing the suffering in them. They do not have the capacity to handle the suffering. They continue to suffer, and that is why they make people around them suffer. Even the people around them are those they love. So when you look at them, and if you see their suffering, that so far there is no one who has helped them to handle the suffering in him or in her, suddenly understanding arises in you, and compassion is born in you. And you can look at him or her with compassion. You don't suffer anymore. You want to do something to help that person suffer less. You want to say something to help him or her suffer less, because you have some amount of compassion within yourself. And with compassion in your heart, you can talk to him or to her in such a way that can help him or her suffer less. You can say, darling, my friend, I know that you have suffered a lot in the past many years. There's a lot of suffering in you. There's a lot of difficulties in you. And in the past, I have not been able to help you to suffer less. In fact, I have reacted angrily and with stubbornness that make you suffer more. I am sorry. It's not my intention to make you suffer, my dear. It's just because I did not see the suffering in you. I did not understand the suffering in you, the difficulties in you. So please, darling, help me. Tell me what is in your heart. Tell me about your suffering, your difficulties, so that I will understand. I believe that if I understand your suffering, I will not react the way I have in the past and make you suffer anymore. Please help me. Tell me what is your heart. That kind of speaking we call a loving speech. And you can do that if you have compassion in your heart. And compassion is possible when you understand the suffering in that person. And when you speak like that, the other person will open his heart to you. With the tool of loving speech, you can open the heart of the other person, and she will tell you the suffering, the difficulties in her. And then you practice deep listening and compassionate listening. And when you listen with compassion, you help the other person suffer less. 1 hour of compassionate listening can help someone suffer much less. And you may be the first person in the world who listens to him or to her. You are a bodhisattva of deep listening. You are Avalokiteshvara. And listen with compassion, you have to learn in order to do. While you listen, where you sit and listen, you have to keep compassion alive in your heart in order to do so. Because while speaking, the other person may have a lot of bitterness, accusation, or blaming, and that may touch off the irritation, the anger in you, and you lose the capacity of listening. So you have to train yourself for many days. When you listen to him or to her, you have to practice mindful breathing and remind yourself that the purpose of listening to that person is only to help him or her suffer less. So even if what the other person says is full of wrong perception, you will not interrupt and correct, because that will ruin the session. You tell yourself that, well, he's full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness and anger, but I am not going to interrupt him. I just listen to help him to suffer less. And several days later, I might provide him or her with some information so that he can correct his perception, and not now. So breathing in and out, and remember that, keep your compassion alive, and you can listen for 1 hour or more with compassion. That can be very healing. And according to our experiences, practicing 4 or 5 days of mindful breathing and looking into the suffering of yourself and of the other person can already allow you to practice deep listening, compassionate listening, and loving speech. Because we have organized so many retreats in the world. And in every retreat, people learn the art of deep listening and loving speech. And the miracle of reconciliation always happens in our retreats. On the 5th day, they have to put into the practice the teaching of deep listening and loving speech. And if the other person is in the retreat, that is easy. But if the other person is at home, and then you can use your telephone in order to practice loving speech and deep listening. And in our experiences, many have used their phone and reconcile with the father, with the mother at home after the retreat. It's very effective, the practice of loving speech and deep listening. And that is the object of the 4th mindfulness training that many of us have received from the Sangha. This is the art of restoring communication. That is the art of reconciling. And you don't need a lot of electronic devices. You need only your in-breath, your out-breath, your capacity of looking deeply into your own suffering, into the suffering of the other person. And finally, you need loving speech, tender speech, and deep listening, compassionate listening. And you can transform the whole situation in just a few days.